If you're sitting there scrolling through a dozen 4K monitors, wondering whether you're about to drop a chunk of cash on a screen that will sit idle most of the time or end up disappointing you in the middle of a raid, I get that. You don't want to spend $1,500 on a monitor that looks amazing in the specs sheet but feels flat when you actually sit down to game or edit video. And you certainly don't want to end up with a display that looks great for a few weeks and then starts showing ghosting, burn-in, or just plain lag when the action heats up. That hesitation is real, especially with a price tag that pushes the upper end of the gaming monitor market. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's break down the ASUS ROG Swift 32-inch PG32 UCDMR the way you'd want to hear it, from the moment you unbox it, to the first game launch, to the long-term daily grind. The first thing you'll notice is the size. A 32-inch panel at native 4K, 38402160, gives you a desktop real estate that feels like stepping into a cockpit. For competitive shooters, that pixel density lets you spot enemies a hair's breadth earlier, and for creators, the extra canvas means you can see fine detail and color grading without constantly zooming. It's a sweet spot between the cramped 27-inch Elite and the massive 38-inch ultra-wide that can dominate a small desk. What truly sets this monitor apart is the QD-OLED panel. Unlike traditional LCDs, each pixel on an OLED emits its own light, which translates to perfect blacks and a contrast ratio that makes dark scenes pop. In practice, that means the shadows in a game like Cyberpunk 2077 stay true black rather than a washed-out gray, and the bright neon signs look vivid without any halo. The 99% DCI-P3 gamut and true 10-bit color depth give you a color volume that satisfies most photo and video editing workflows. If you've ever been frustrated with the washed-out look of cheap 4K panels, this is a noticeable upgrade. Now, the headline specs 240Hz refresh rate and a 0.03 milliseconds gray-to-gray response time sound almost sci-fi. In everyday gaming, the difference shows up as smoother motion and virtually no motion blur, even when you're turning at full speed in an FPS. I ran a couple of fast-paced titles on a RTX 4090, and the monitor kept up without any frame rate throttling, thanks to the DisplayPort 2.1 bandwidth. The GSWC compatibility also means you won't be hit with tearing even if you're not using an NVIDIA card. The adaptive sync works with AMD GPUs too. But let's be honest, to truly enjoy 4K at 240Hz you need a top-tier GPU. If you're still on a 3080 or a Radeon 6700 XT, you'll find yourself capping at 144Hz in many titles, which means you're paying for a capability you can't fully exploit right now. That's the first practical trade-off. The monitor is future-proof, but the rest of your rig has to keep pace. One of the hidden strengths of the ROG Swift is the OLED Care Pro suite. The Neo proximity sensor detects when you step away from the desk and automatically dims or puts the panel into a low-power mode. For someone who streams or works long hours, that feature quietly saves energy and reduces the risk of static image retention. You can also enable uniform brightness, which evens out any minor hotspot that OLED panels sometimes exhibit. In my setup, after a few days of use, the screen still feels consistent whether you're looking at a bright landscape or a dark UI. Connectivity is another area where the monitor punches above its weight. There's a full-featured USB-C port that delivers up to 90 W of power, meaning you can hook a laptop directly into the display, charge it, and get video over a single cable. For a content creator who moves a MacBook Pro between a desktop and a portable workstation, that eliminates a tangled mess of adapters. The inclusion of HDMI 2.1 and a DP80, DisplayPort 2.1, cable out of the box means you won't need to buy any extra dongles to reach the bandwidth required for 4K 240Hz. Now, the downsides. OLED panels are notorious for potential burn-in if you leave static UI elements on the screen for too long. Think health bars, HUD elements, or a static desktop background. ASUS tries to mitigate this with the care functions, but the risk isn't zero. If you're a streamer who leaves your chat overlay on screen 24/7, you'll need to be disciplined about rotating content or using the built-in dimming features. Also, the HDR implementation tops out at Display HDR 400. That's decent, but it's not the HDR 1000 you see on premium TV panels, so